Tuesday. I hope everybody is off to a great start. It has been a very eventful week for me so far. A lot is going on, and we are pushing toward the goals we have set for this year. Stay tuned. I have a lot of good stuff coming towards you. You know the routine. If you like what you hear, click the like button, click the share button. And if you want to get reminders and stay connected, subscribe. So, let me tell you something. In the years and years that I have studied all of the enigmatic issues that plague the black community, from our socioeconomic ills, our issues within public education, mass incarceration, the disintegration of the black family unit and single parenthood, African American adolescent and young adult male violence, and on down the line, that I have given my life to understanding and coming up with solutions and building on the great minds and work of those who came before me. There is one thing that I have looked at, I've grappled with, and I have reconciled myself to, and that is the true building of black wealth is inextricably connected to black love. And while this is a controversial statement in a time where the false narrative of a post-racial America is being pushed, and there are commercials by the droves of interracial couples, predominantly white men and black women, being pushed. The true thing is, it is a responsibility of black men to build wealth. It is the responsibility of black women to ensure that the wealth is projected down the genial lanes of that black man's gene pool. In other words, it's our responsibility to create an environment within the household that allows the black wealth to remain within the black community so that it can flourish. Now, obviously, there are some practices outside of what happens in the home that are necessary, but even how you teach generational wealth, how you teach group economics, how you teach all of that is initially initiated in the home as a part of the development of values, interests, and principles of young black minds. But when you marry outside of your race, when you determine and decide that you are going to love someone else other than a black woman, I'm speaking specifically to black men because men are supposed to be choosing their wives, not succumbing to being pursued by them. In other words, a lot of what we do is we end up getting caught up in who wants to give us attention, and we don't have to put in the work, and a bunch of other things. We think this is better than that, and a bunch of other things that I'm going to cover in this series on black love and generational wealth. But this is just the precursor. So the first thing I'm going to do is debunk a myth. There's a myth. Anytime you start talking about who someone chooses, especially when it comes down to choosing someone of the opposite race or outside of the race, there is this, a person can't control who they fall in love with. It's the biggest bunch of crock I've ever heard in my life. It's absolutely ridiculous, ludicrous, absurd. We all determine who we fall in love with, and I can show you a million different ways we do it outside of race. The average woman the average woman who is about her business, that's got her career going, that's doing things, is not going to put herself in a position where she's going to fall in love with a deadbeat dude that's got a record as long as his arm. Now, things happen, and people deal with things based on where they are in their self-esteem, but generally speaking, we determine the parameters of the type of person we're going to be with. There are people that will not fall in love with an overweight person. There are people who will not fall in love with a light-skinned person. There are people who will not fall in love with a dark-skinned person. I'm talking about all within the same race. We choose the parameters of what we're going to allow ourselves to be drawn to pursue, to accept. And it can be along economic lines, it can be along academic lines, it can be along status. You know, there are women out there not gonna date a dude that no matter how much he makes, if he's got a uniform on and he gets his hands dirty. This is the reality. So the idea that we don't choose who we fall in love with is BS. We exactly control it. Bottom line, I have had a very successful life. I've had some ups and downs and ins and outs, some hard knocks, but I've lived a life that is beyond what the average person will live financially and in spaces. And I've been around a bunch of white women, especially during my younger years being in entertainment and as an athlete. I've been around a bunch of them. Never once crossed that path, never once crossed that line. That was always this thing within me that loved my sisters. By no means was I perfect, but that's the one line I didn't cross. I wasn't crossing that line. And I had to say all of that to say we do choose. And why is that important for me to make that point? Because we need to start choosing. We need to start choosing who we're with. And this isn't for my brothers out there that are going to get mad because we got this gender war going. We spend a whole lot of time talking about why the other group is trash. And a lot of this stuff is being subliminally fed to us. Let me tell you something. Yes, you've had your heart broke, ladies, by a black man. Black men, you've probably been through the ringer with a black woman. There's no race where the same thing isn't happening. White women taking white men through hell. White women getting half. White women doing all that. Ain't nothing more dangerous in the world than a white woman. When you study the likelihood of dying at the hand of your spouse, you don't want to be the spouse of a Eurocentric female. I'll put it at that. Doesn't mean that other races you don't get hurt, you don't get killed, you don't get violated in some way. Everybody has issues. We got the passport bros. Now what you're gonna find out is they will come over here, marry you, get access to the country, get access to the rights that come with being a citizen in this country, divorce you, take half, and take it back to their country. You know why? Because that's one of the ways that you insulate and protect wealth. When you sit up and you decide that you're marrying outside of your race, you have basically, at best, subtracted half of your material net worth from the black community at best. That means if you live and y'all stay together, at some point, what ends up with her will end up with those who she is connected to and related to, and they won't have the loyalty she has, even if she develops a loyalty to the black struggle. You know, and there are women who will, because why? And I know white women who were actually friends of mine before they met their black husbands. And what I can tell you is one of the ways that white women will actually become a part of the struggle or become a part of the passion and about it is because you fool around and have a baby by this black man. And especially if it turns out to be a male, you'll find out that your white privilege does not extend to your black son. And that's the other thing we got to remember. Up until recently, when the numbers of whites as a total population or demographic began to dwindle, and they were not producing offspring at a rate to sustain their current majority position in the population, all of a sudden it stopped being black, even though you had a white parent, and started to be biracial. That was by design. Up until 20 years ago, if you had a black parent, you were black, no matter how white the other parent was. And while we call it biracial, that same thing extends. A biracial kid does not get the same privilege as a white kid. And so then there is this thing where a lot of these white moms, become passionate and protective, and they start to see what their sons go through because they see their husbands go through it, and then they see their sons go through it, and all of a sudden they look at it from a different perspective. But at the same time, they're still white. There's still the ability for them to retreat back into their enclave and take a part of the wealth. And again, now I want to say this: I don't hate my brothers and sisters who have married outside of their race. I love you to death. But again, there's a certain level of loyalty. Number one is, to me, I'm more loyal to my home than I'm into anything else. So whatever's in my home, I'm going to be loyal to, and nothing I'm going to be more loyal to outside of God than my wife. So if I'm married, then that's my number one loyalty. So if I'm married to someone who doesn't share my background, doesn't share my history, doesn't share my ethnic makeup, then a part of me is given to understanding hers. A part of me is given to loving her and making her feel comfortable in my space. So a part of my intensity is given to something that in truth isn't supporting me, my values, interests, or who I really am. I've given a part of myself away. You do that anyway in marriage. You give a part of yourself away, but when you're giving it to somebody who can relate, someone who can connect, someone who understands, then it falls in the same space. Plus, if you give it to someone who's passionate about who they are, even if you break up and they take some of that's still going to end up where it needs to be, in the hands of black people, in the hands of black businesses, supporting black causes. When you don't do that, it goes outside of that scope and it falls into the hands of those, in many instances, who are operating in opposition to our progression. So in essence, there's literally a genetic, emotional, spiritual, and economic responsibility to marry inside of your race. It's not something that is uniquely pushed by angry black men. It is something that is universally practiced in our groups. The groups of power, in this instance, whites in the West, don't have as big of an issue of stepping out because they control everything. They operate the sphere of power, so they don't control it. But if you look truly at everything and you look at the subgroups, Italians want their sons marrying Italian women. Asians want their sons marrying Asian women. And you look around and there's a reason beyond I'm a bigot. And again, if you choose to marry outside of your race, do so from an educated position, and do so understanding who you are. My thing is, the more I look at myself and love myself, the more it demands that I take a black woman as my wife. And no matter how many times things don't work out, I will never sit up and say, it's the black woman's fault, it's this, and this. I'm going to sit up and say, maybe we need to relook at what I'm doing to enter into something, or how I'm entering into it. Or maybe it just takes a little bit more work, or whatever it is. But what I will never do is abandon the desire to love a black woman because loving black women hasn't produced what I thought it should, or at some point in my lifetime, a black woman hurt me. And I'm pretty sure I done hurt some people. So the thing is, I had to grow up. And for me, it happened a long time ago. I've never ever desired anybody but a black woman, but I had to grow up and understand that this whole relationship thing is not about feelings. Romance didn't even enter into the scope of marriage till the 13th century. Marriage has always been about the perpetuation of family values, the protection and development of wealth, the ability to project generations down the line how your offspring will act and perform. That's what family is about. It's about creating a little genetic funnel through which you can project yourself into a space you will never physically exist. At this moment, if as a black man, if you're watching this, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren are similarly present in you right now. Meaning that in your semen, or if you've already had your children and they haven't, then you've projected out already. But when the moment you start pursuing love, your progeny for generations are seminally present in you. And who you project that into has an impact on what they become. And so this, again, isn't about hatred at all. Matter of fact, if you follow me, I'm not about hatred. I am about defending ourselves, protecting ourselves, being willing to go the distance to ensure the safety of our women, our children, and our elderly, and our brothers. I am that. I don't have the energy to hate anybody. I don't have the energy to project hatred on anybody. It takes too much out of you. It drains you. It makes you miserable, and it will make you sick. But I will say that I have a strong desire to love myself, and in loving myself, I am literally drawn to the thing that I see me most in, and that's a black woman. And we need to understand the power of marrying black as black men and how we protect our black economic development and growth when we do so. Do we have a lot of issues going on with our women? Absolutely. There's no excuse for not, that's still no excuse for not marrying a black woman. That means we've got some healing to do. That means we've got some fixing, some developing, some maturing, and some growing to do. But what we cannot do is abandon our responsibility to love ourselves. And you cannot love yourselves when you're looking at a white woman and thinking you've won solely because she's white. And I'm not saying you can't be loved and you can't love. That's not what I'm saying. Seen some great relationships last a very long time. Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if we're talking pro-blackness and the protection and the generation of wealth, over time, generational wealth, then what we must understand is the importance of doing that within the collective, and it's impossible to do when you're bringing someone that's outside the collective. It simply cannot be done that way. On that note, look, I'm out of here. I want to thank you for stopping in. Look, if you believe in the work that we do at the Odyssey Project, we are asking that you support the organization. Look in the description box and see the way that you can give so that we can continue our research, continue our programs, and continue our work. But nevertheless, I hope that what I shared with you in the beginning of this series hits home. There are a couple of books if you want to learn more about generational wealth and the importance of the family and all the other elements. Check out my book, The War on Black Wealth. There should be a link in the box. If not, just Google it. It'll pop up on any of the bookstores from Barnes & Noble to Amazon, Kobo, Sony, and all that. But you need to get it. I think that was book number 25, if I'm not mistaken. All right, I'm out of here.